Welcome back, everybody, to the Rocky Road podcast. I'm Mandy, and I'm joined here with Kristen, and we have a new guest to share with you today. His name is Erik. So, Erik, can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Hi, ladies. I'm so excited to be on the show. And I just learned before we came on that you're both music therapists. So there's going to hopefully be some talk about music therapy in there, because that was a big piece of my healing journey as well. And I'm guessing, am I in the 5-minute zone? I know Kevin had 5 minutes to introduce himself.
Yeah, right.
So let's see how many words I can get in 5 minutes. So thank you again for having me on. Yeah, I'm Erik Rosa. I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts in Somerset. It's a very blue collar town. I grew up, I'm one of two kids. I have a younger brother, and I spent 18 years there, moved just outside of Boston, went to university at Brandeis, where I was lucky enough to meet my wife my junior year of college. And we have been married now for 26 years, and we'll have been together for 31 years at the end of January. So that's
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
A really exciting milestone for the two of us. When I graduated in 1993, so your audience can do the math.
I was born in 1991, if that makes you feel better. So.
I don't think it does, Andy.
I'm 51 and I'm proud of it. I moved to New York City in 1993 and spent 18 years in various roles in the Wall Street community, investment banking and trading. Moved in 2011 after my mental health really cratered and took a nosedive, and my wife and I moved to Colorado. So we are just about 120 miles to the southwest of Denver, in Snowmass Village. I think some of your audience may be familiar with Aspen, and so we're part of the Aspen Snowmass ski community. And we moved here in October of 2011, completely uprooted and changed our careers and trajectory. And I've been teaching skiing here full time since the winter of 2011, 2012. So we can certainly spend some time on nature therapy as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. We both do that too.
Oh, it's awesome.
This makes sense why your Instagram is filled with absolutely beautiful pictures of you on the slope. So I didn't know you were an instructor. There's so many. It's always beautiful out there.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and my handle is Ski Sherpa. So if anybody picks up on that as well. So yeah, my Instagram, as Kristen was saying, is full of ski photos and mountain bike photos from the summertime.
That's amazing.
Really cool. And just recently in January of 2021, one of my very close friends and I started a podcast, a mental health podcast called From Survivor to Thriver. It's all about two guys being vulnerable and being open about our own journeys. But most importantly, we started it so that we could really shatter the stigma around mental health conversations. And so it's about shattering stigmas and empowering voices for those who have been affected by mental illnesses and trauma, such as myself and my co-host, Mark.
Vulnerability is such an important word. And I think that one of the most striking things that I saw in my research while preparing for this episode was vulnerability as a superpower. And I love that phrase that you chose to use there. And I think it absolutely can be a superpower. Not everybody gets there and not everybody is comfortable with that, but you had to go through a pretty long road to convince yourself and to live it out as a superpower. So I'd love to rewind and just talk about some of your history and how you've gotten to this thriving place that you are now, ready to share your journey and share your experiences with other people in order to help them.
Sure. I love that. I love starting out with vulnerability, because I think in order to be real and raw and authentic in any kind of conversation, especially conversations that relate to mental health, vulnerability is first and foremost. And so we can rewind a few decades back, and then I'll I'll let your audience know what I actually mean by vulnerability as a superpower, because I think
That'd be
so many
great.
people see it actually as a weakness or as a
Mm-hmm.
kryptonite, and I see it, the complete opposite. So,
Sure.
as
Take us back. Let's go back a couple
sure. So
decades.
we're going to go back to a time when neither one of you was born. And so you said 91. I was born in 71. Uh,
Sure. Wow, what a great decade of music, honestly. So
yes, it was a
Real.
great decade of music. I was alive during the bicentennial, which is actually
that's
pretty
cool.
pretty cool as well. So we could check
Yeah. At this
the
point, we
box
can
there.
say we were alive during 9/11 because a lot of people, like the younger kids are coming up now through high school that are not even saying that. So, we have something.
Exactly. Exactly. And I lived in New York City on 9/11. So
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
oh yeah, we
That's
have a lot to
Well, all right, we'll get there. We'll get
we have
there.
a
Back
lot
in the
to unpack
70s.
here.
Okay. Back to the 70s disco
Back
era.
back to the 70s era, Studio 54 in New York City, although I wasn't living there. Yeah, so as far back as I can remember was around the age of 7, and that's when I knew something about me was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I didn't know how to verbalize it, but what it really was the beginnings of decades long severe anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. And so for me, it really began around sleeping, and I was a young child, uh, fearful of going to bed. I would wake up in the middle of the night, kind of nightmares. Didn't understand what was going on with me, but that very quickly led to the beginnings of my obsessive compulsive loop, where I would spend my waking hours very worried about going to bed and the
Mm.
fear of going to bed and what that would mean. And then I would of course go to bed and the anxiety spiral would start, and I wouldn't be able to sleep.
Mm,
And that continued for quite a while, and into my high school years it really led to deeper battles with OCD, and for me that manifested itself in terms of intrusive thoughts. And
mm,
so for your audience, just to give a little clarity around intrusive thoughts, they are typically thoughts that are extremely terrifying, sometimes geared towards loved ones or people very close
mm,
to you. They're unwanted, and they are often completely and totally out of character with who you truly are at your core.
mm,
And so for me, those intrusive thoughts manifested themselves in a couple of different ways. One was the harming others, which
Mm.
couldn't be any further from the person that I am. And the other that manifested itself both through high school and into college, and into my New York City days, was this fear of dying from a severe illness. And
Mm.
in my
mhm,
case, uh, being a child of the late 80s and early 90s, I was absolutely terrified that I was going to die from AIDS,
Mm.
mm,
although there was absolutely no basis in reality or fact around that.
Mm.
mhm,
I was convinced, and so I would spend all of my time just thinking about, okay, this is it. I'm going to die, trying to push those thoughts away, and it would lead to that deeper and deeper loop of anxiety, to the point where there were times I couldn't get out of my house. There were times I couldn't leave my apartment in the city. It
mm,
was just that really gripping fear.
Mm.
mhm,
Uh, as I moved through my years in New York, what better place for someone with severe anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder than you stick them on Wall Street, where where the stress level is about as high as you can get.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
well, that's what I was thinking when you were saying you were living in New York, and it's like even just there's no quiet in the city whatsoever. There's none. Even if you black
Mhm,
out your curtains and put headphones in, there is still so much chaos even everywhere.
Yeah,
mhm,
and I'm glad you bring that up, Kristen, because when I think back to my time living in New York, um, at first it seems like this incredible idea, like, oh, I'm going to live in New York City.
Mm.
It's the city that never sleeps. Now that I hear the city that never sleeps, and I think back to that 7-year old like little Erik,
Mm.
I'm like, wow. what a juxtaposition.
Mm.
But living day in and day out in New York City and working day in and day out in New York City for 18 years, as you said, it quickly goes from this really cool idea of I'm going to be in this city and I'm going to be able to get around and there's all these things to do, to it becomes who you are, and you can't escape from it, and the fast pace and the stress is overwhelming. But what I had this uncanny ability to wear a facade that
Mhm.
was pretty much ironclad. And I
Mm.
was struggling on the inside. I never told anybody what was happening. And on the outside, people who looked at me would have just seen, a 20-something-year-old in a pinstripe suit who looked totally put together, the image
Mm.
that I wanted to show. I had a very successful career, in spite of what I was struggling with
Mhm.
internally.
Mm.
And it
I
wasn't
think that
until I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's really interesting. And I think that's great that you share that and your openness to sharing that
Mm.
because we're not far from New York City, being in Pennsylvania. And there's a lot of people that we've met or I have met that have been on Wall Street or New York City or lived there or go to college there or something. It's pretty easy to meet people that are in that area. And it looks like this pristine, wonderful life that you see. And a lot of people that want to go white collar route want to be those successful business people that work on Wall Street and make tons of money and, have the stock and bonds and the trades and all the things that they do. And it's like you have that, like you're saying, that facade of this is what the life looks like. And a lot of people are looking towards that as their role model or their example.
Yep.
And it's from your experience, it was vastly different.
It was vastly different. And I can also tell you from my experience with other people in that environment, uh, when you look at it from the outside in, right, all you really see is the wealth and the trappings of
Mm.
wealth.
Yeah,
And especially in today's culture with Instagram, uh,
sure.
people taking photographs, being on their private planes, going on these beautiful vacations.
Hmm.
From the inside out, what people never see are the 100-hour weeks, the extreme amount of stress, the lack of
Hmm.
sleep. I remember I was in my, let's see, I was probably early 30s, and I was working at a really small investment firm, and we were doing healthcare M&A. I remember coming into the office, my wife and I, that morning before I left the apartment, we had made plans to go out to dinner that night. I came into the office and it was 7:30 in the morning, and the person who was running the office at the time turned to me out of nowhere and he said, "I need you to be on the 4 o'clock flight this afternoon to Frankfurt, because things with the deal aren't going so well, and you need to be over there in person." And
Mm.
so that's the reality of what that life is like. And when I think through so many of those instances of thinking my day was going to go one way and then having to pick up the phone and call my wife and say I'll be home in
Mm.
an hour because I need to pack my bags, I'll be in Germany like tomorrow morning.
No.
That's what people don't see. It's all of the stress and all of the sacrifices, and really the deterioration of both one's mental health as well as one's physical health.
Hmm.
Mm.
Sure.
So yeah, the more that I can get that message out, that it's the reality is not what you see.
Right.
uh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
for sure. And there are people I know that live in Pennsylvania. There are people I know that live in South Jersey that take the train every day into New York
Hmm.
City. And so talking about a 2-hour commute each way, so 4 hours of your day is spent
Wow.
commuting
Hmm.
into your job.
Hmm.
It's hard, I know, for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. But when
Right.
it really started to change for me was in 2004. I was 33 years old. You ladies were 13. And
I was, yeah. She's a little older than me.
okay. So Mandy was 13. I was
Yeah.
33.
Yeah.
And I had just changed jobs, and one of the underlying things with anxiety and OCD, how it manifested for me, was my childhood was filled with not feeling safe and not feeling secure. And so times of great change for me, whether it was moving to school, or whether it was moving to New York, or whether it was changing jobs, all of that uncertainty really created massive waves of anxiety for me.
Mm,
And so finally in 2004, I had moved to a new job, and uh, that fall, out of nowhere, I suffered my first dissociative episode.
mm,
Some people would call them psychotic breaks. They're nervous breakdowns back in the old days,
mm,
uh,
Mm-hmm.
and and that was really the first time that my wife had ever seen me in that state. I wasn't able to control the facade. I wasn't able to, when asked, "How are you?" In that closed question kind of way, just be like, "Oh, I'm good. Everything's fine. I'm great."
mm,
Um, it was really the first time where I was truly, vulnerable and needed help. And so my wife was the first person to say, "I think you need to see somebody. I think you need to speak to somebody." And that was the first time I went to therapy, and it really started to uncover some things for me. I
Mm.
went on medication. I was seeing my therapist 3 times a week, and it really started to change things for me. But what I decided, and I think this is something that unfortunately many men do. So if
mm,
you're a male listening to this, please don't do this. We often realize like, okay, I'm cured, everything's great. I'm my own best doctor. I stopped going to
mm.
therapy. I stopped taking my medication, thinking I'm cured of anxiety and OCD. And so in 2006,
I'm going to give men credit here because that's a very common thing for men and women alike. So it's not just a guy thing. It honestly is a lot of people noticing that the medications are working. And a lot of the time, it
Mm-hmm.
can be a mental health. Obviously, if you're, for example, my husband's diabetic, he has to take thyroid meds every day. He's not going to stop those. He needs those every day. But mental health meds, a lot of people say, I feel better. I don't need these anymore, not realizing it's a long term. So
yes.
I'm going to give the guys
Yeah.
a vote of credit here. That
and,
mistake
and
is pretty widespread, unfortunately, just because
sure.
a lot of us don't want to say I'm dependent on a medication to feel my best, but sometimes it's going to have to be a long term, you know.
Right. And it's also that thought of like the medication is what's helping you feel better. So then you're like, oh, well, I'm feeling better now. I don't need it. And it's like, no, well, that medication is actually being used to get you there.
Yes. Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And so to use the title of your podcast, my rocky road got even rockier,
Mm,
and it went from being a road to sort of a cliff. And so 2006 came dissociative episode number 2, which was
mm,
which was deeper and darker and longer than the first one. And that's when I realized, okay, something needs to change.
Mm.
And
mm,
so back to my therapist, I went on to some new medications. So it wasn't only just, SSRIs, but now we were talking about, a benzo to help alleviate the anxiety, to get me out of crisis so that I could really
mm,
stabilize to even begin to have those conversations. And
mm,
Sure.
and so from that point on, it really became me. And this is what you were talking about earlier about kind of thriving. It went from me surviving through 1971 to 2006, and
Mm.
surviving with these two personas, right? The facade that I wanted the whole world to see, and then what I was really struggling with on the inside, to me finally owning it and saying, okay, something needs to change. I know that I'm not okay, and that's okay.
mm,
And then starting to be more open and starting to share my story, not only with my wife and my therapist, with some friends. And that's when things really began to change for me. And my wife and I kind of looked at each other and said, maybe it's time for a much bigger change. And I had fallen in love with skiing when I was 33. So there's a lot that revolved around me turning 33,
Yeah.
um, and so I fell in love with skiing and decided, you know what, let's just move to Colorado instead of
oh,
going on vacation out west here to ski this incredible snow and be in the Rockies. Why don't we just let's move and let's see if we can teach skiing and see if that'll be the new career for us. And so
mm,
up, uprooted everything in the fall of 2011 and moved here to Snowmass Village. And I've been teaching skiing full time. My wife, up until recently, has been teaching skiing full time as well, and now she's she's finding a greater purpose with her communications career, which she always was doing sort of as a side consulting job, but she's back doing that now full time.
Mm.
And moving out here and being in nature and getting to slide around on snow all winter long and getting to ride on the dirt all summer long, and what that's done for my own personal well-being, both physically and mentally. It was such an amazing change,
Mm.
and when I look back on it now, I couldn't imagine spending a 1 second longer in New York.
Mm.
This was really the beginning of kind of part two of my overall healing journey.
Mm.
But to
Sure, it was a
Yeah,
solid page turn in your journey. I mean,
yes, yeah,
to turn the page, completely start new with a blank canvas and grow from there.
totally. And to bring it full circle to vulnerability as a superpower. When we started the podcast, we started having guests on, and I started thinking about my own healing journey, and Mark and I talked about his healing journey and the healing journey of so many of our guests, going from survivor to thriver. And what I kept hearing, the thread that kept coming through, was this idea of vulnerability. And at some point, having to get vulnerable, both with yourself, but vulnerable with other people who
Mm.
care about you, and who you can trust, and are not going to judge you. And what I found is, the more I became vulnerable with people and shared my own story, that the better I started to feel. And the better I
Mhm.
started to feel, the stronger I became. And the more willing I was to become vulnerable, and the more helpful I was to other people as they were beginning their healing journeys and becoming vulnerable. And so I kept thinking, wow, the better I feel, the stronger I feel. It's kind of
Mm.
like
Mhm.
a superpower, that I
It's a
can turn,
self-feeding cycle too.
Right, yeah.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And it's I'm again dating myself, but I remember the Wonder Twins cartoon, and Wonder Twins power activate. And but it's the same thing with vulnerability. Like, when I turn on that vulnerability switch,
Mm.
what it does for me and for others around me is so empowering.
Mm.
Mhm.
And so that's why I love to talk about it.
And I noticed too, a lot of times for us, vulnerability is something we talk about a lot. And I would say Kristen and I are very vulnerable with each other. And, we like
Mm.
to be vulnerable with others around us in a safe boundary way. And that's an ever revolving door and always changing. But I think stepping out that first time in the vulnerability is almost like stepping out into the middle of the street when you're playing Frogger. And you're just like, please don't hit me. Like I'm trying to just take a step somewhere and I'm just trying to see if this will work. And it's really, really scary. And I think you had that, the episode that you encountered the first time, like it took that to get you to say, let me try to be vulnerable. But not just that, you had to have that happen again for that to happen.
Mm.
And those are like really extreme things that you had to experience, that a lot of people don't experience that, and they maybe keep it all bottled up inside, and they're putting that facade on the whole time, and everything is okay, and I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And we all have that to a certain degree, depending, if we're in the public or if we're in our house, or where we're located and everything. But like, tell me about that step, especially as a male. I just think it is harder as men. Women are just natured more emotional. We could cry and people aren't going to judge us for crying, and most of the time. But if a male breaks down, or a male like has this happen, it's always just a bigger quote deal in a way, because that's not how people work, and that's not how men should be. And so I'm really curious, like that, struggling with anxiety, struggling with OCD, having this episode happen to you. I'm sure you probably had in-person therapy. I'm assuming this was like
Oh,
pre-Zoom
yes.
world. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
this was
So
pre
You
this
had
was
to go
pre
to an
Zoom.
office.
This was
yeah, right.
pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the good old days, right? So,
Yes.
so walking to a therapist's office after going through all of this, like, talk about what that experience was like as a male, going to a therapist, getting the help that you knew that you needed, honestly, with the support and encouragement from your wife. Like, what
Mhm.
was that process like for you?
Sure, I love the question. And so, putting myself back there, I would say textbook male in how I dealt with my mental health issues.
Hmm.
My friends who know me will say like I am the furthest thing from your typical like male bro guy kind of person. Um, but when it came to my mental health, absolutely, it was okay. I'm going to solve this problem myself.
Mm,
Right? I am, and I really thought that I was going to live out the rest of my life the way I had lived it for the first 33 years. I thought I was going to hide this from everybody. I
Mm.
thought I was going to continue to be able to get away with all these, I call them closed-ended questions, and we could talk about that a little bit later because I think
Sure.
that's one of the keys, especially when it comes to men, to be able to flip the script on how we deal with our mental health. But
mm,
it was that constant. I'm okay. Yeah, everything's good. Yep, fine, awesome, no problem. And then on the inside, I kept thinking, I can't believe I'm going to have to do this for another 30, 40, 50 years.
mm,
That first step when I went to my therapist, and I'd be curious on and for you guys as well, what your experience was when you stepped into that arena. But I know for me, I walked in the room, and the first thing I thought to myself was, I can't tell him what's really going on.
mm.
I can't tell him what thoughts are going on in my head. I was terrified that
Sure.
if he found out, the New York City Police Department was going to be outside the door and ready, like, to
Hmm.
put me in cuffs and take me away. And so it took me a little bit of time to really feel comfortable enough that I love your analogy, Mandy, because I played a lot of Frogger when I was a kid. Um, that idea of Frogger, and you kind of step out into the street and the cars
Hmm.
are coming, and you're like, oh, do I take that next step, or am I going to get run
Yeah.
over and splattered,
Mm,
and I'm not going to get a second chance at this. And so I
Sure.
waded into it very slowly. But what I then found was, once some of those walls sort of got knocked down, the floodgates opened.
mm,
Mm.
And all of the sudden, everything from my past and the present all started to come out, and
Hmm.
things started to make sense.
Hmm.
And it was, I talk about a lot on the show. It's as though you shake up this giant Coke bottle and you open, right, the cover,
Yeah.
and I felt, for me, it was as though somebody had shaken a Coke bottle and stuck a Mentos in and put the cap on. And then for me, it was like this explosion. And the more I started to talk, the more I started to feel comfortable, and I could start to feel that shame go away.
mm,
The guilt took much, much, much longer, but that
mm,
shame of, oh, there's something different about me, or I used to think as a young kid, I'm not like all the other kids. Like, I'm broken. I was
Hmm.
convinced that there was something really terribly wrong with me, and that started to go away the more and more that I talked about it. And I would say to everybody in your audience, it is, and I'm not going to lie and say it's easy. It is probably the most difficult step along the journey, is that very first time when you become vulnerable and you tell somebody. But it's
Hmm.
also probably the biggest step that you can take in your journey, because the weight gets lifted from your shoulders,
mm,
and
Hmm.
suddenly, the piano that was on your back, or whatever analogy you want to think about, that weight
mm,
is gone. And a lot of the feelings and the thoughts and the emotions, which you had given so much power because you were constantly thinking about them or pushing them away,
mm,
suddenly went away.
Hmm.
And I was able to think more clearly. I was able to start to even look at it, and I continue in therapy to this day. I continue to be on medication to this day. Uh, I can now look at it as though I'm watching myself in a movie, and I can detach and recognize when something isn't right, and not be so deeply embedded in it, but
mm,
recognize, hey, that person. And oftentimes I say it's little Erik. All the inner child work that I did, I recognize that it's little Erik that needs some sort of healing, or needs to feel safe and secure in a moment, and I'm able to kind of give him what he needs, and
mm.
then that
Hmm.
makes me feel much better in the present moment.
That
Mhm.
awareness is really huge because that's a point that a lot of people don't get to, because a lot of the way that our American kind of culture is that it's very reactive. And the only thing that we really preventatively do is get our oil change and go to the dentist. That's pretty much it. There's no preventative maintenance emotionally or physically that we are awarded. Other countries have their own, medical and all those issues. But I'm just speaking from my experience here is that, man, if we could just preventatively all have some mental health treatment when we are little Eric and little Mandy and little Kristen, to become more aware of those things before they become these big, giant OCD monsters in our
Mhm.
head that we have to tackle in our adult life. When we're facing up with them for the very first time, saying, I've now had 3 decades of handling this, and now I finally feel like I have a sword in my hand. And that's
Mhm.
really, really difficult to be able to provide to people, if especially in a culture where there are so many stigmas. And we're joining you in that mission of breaking all those down, because I think what I'm hearing from you is that you are supporting of men and their vulnerability and being open to going to therapy, to getting the help that they need. We're very supportive of everybody, but we're supportive of women doing the same thing. And so I'm thinking like Captain Planet, with our forces combined, man, we can do some damage in a good way. But I want to hear from you with your podcast. You have a lot of different topics, and oh my gosh, you just cover such a range of things. One of the recent ones that I haven't gotten the opportunity to listen to yet, I think it might have been your most recent one though. It talks about getting to know yourself and becoming aware of yourself and working on yourself in order to then heal. And so I
Yes.
think it's really cool that you are diving into all the work that you did, not the work that the people around you did. Um, and I would love to speak into what is one of the most common things that you see in your experiences that everybody needs to work on in themselves in order for all of us to really take better mental care of ourselves.
Sure. And I love how you led in with this idea too of preventative.
Mm,
When we think back, to being kids, we all go to the pediatrician, and we all get different vaccinations against different curable diseases and things, and then we continue to see the pediatrician until we're a certain age, and then now then we start to see an adult doctor, and um, but when the three of us were growing up, you just went to the pediatrician, and then he kind of checked you out. You get a lollipop, and out you went.
mhm,
Um, no one ever said like, "How are you feeling up here?"
mhm,
And or associating, in my case, stomach aches and headaches, and putting that together with, well, maybe there's something that's not just physical. Maybe there's something that's cognitive that's going on. And just recently, I'm getting more and more excited about seeing how kids are starting to go to the pediatrician, and as part of those checkups, they're asking them, "Hey, you know, how are things? Are you having different thoughts? Are there things that are bothering you, or how are you feeling? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling sad?"
mhm.
So I feel like that tide is starting to turn a little bit.
That's great.
But to get back to your other question, when I think about all of our episodes, and I think about all the things I talk about, and I think about the different keynote speeches that I get to give to some high schools around the country. I think the overarching theme that I like to think about is this idea of meeting yourself where you're at.
Mhm,
And just even in the most recent episode with Lee Hopkins, and this whole idea of having to really find friendships, and there was a lot of loneliness behind that, and even the episode before that with Andrew Velasquez, and growing up in the closet
mhm,
as a boy in the macho world of East LA,
mhm,
of parents of Mexican descent, and so having to break that stigma of you're supposed to really be macho and tough, and here's this amazing makeup artist nowadays, very well known around the world. And so it's stories like that, and this idea of meeting yourself where you're at, and by that I mean you know each and every day, the most important person that you have to check in with is yourself. I think so often we're guilty of, especially those of us who are empaths. And I'm getting that sense from the both of you just from this amazing exchange that we're having. Always wanting to be there for other people, always wanting to help other people, and we spend so much time and energy wanting to do that that we tend
Mm,
to neglect ourselves. And so that phrase, I took it from all of the time that I spent in corporate America, where all I ever heard was, you need to meet other people where they're at. You need to flex your style. Or when I was a kid, all my report cards, it was kind of, straight A's across the board. And then Erik needs to learn how to get along with others. Erik needs to learn how to, be quiet and let other people speak. But what that really was my cry for, like, I just want to be heard.
mm,
I
Mhm.
just want somebody to listen. And so this whole idea of meeting yourself where you're at, it's something I do every day now. And I wake up and I check in and I say, okay, where am I today? How am I really
Mhm.
feeling today? What do I have to give today? Today was the first day since I think the 17th of December where I haven't been with a ski client. And
mm,
I woke up and I said, okay, where am I today? Great. I'm going to sit. I'm going to have coffee. I don't have to get on snow. I'm going to give my body a break. I'm going to get to be on this amazing podcast. The rest of the day, maybe I'll read a book. Maybe I'll take a nap. But that's where I am today. And
mhm,
Mhm.
each and every day, I kind of go through that mental checklist.
Mhm.
And for your audience, I think it's a really important thing to do because the world goes by so quickly and our days go by so quickly, and we're kind of trained to to be able to do things and support other people, but if it's that analogy with the oxygen mask in the airplane, right?
mm,
It's
Yeah.
put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. And if you don't meet yourself where you're at, over time, there's no way that you can be there when other people need you,
mhm,
and you'll certainly not be there for yourself.
mhm. Well,
I
go ahead, Mandy.
I love the self-awareness again that we go back to, just of knowing where you are at that time. And we've talked about this before, that your journey and your seasons of life change, and that can be quickly, that can take a while too. So you can have a week where you need to hibernate and you need some
Mm,
solitude and you need some quiet, you need some rest, and you just say no to everybody else. And that is so hard
Yep.
for people that love people and want to be around people and care for them. But that self-awareness is really important. And exactly like you're saying, I even with vulnerability, when you start sharing things, I feel like they people start sharing things back to you. And it's this give, not always, but in certain cases, yes. And they share some things, and then you take that little nugget of knowledge and you try to better yourself with what they can give you. So even learning self-awareness, the process of learning that, I'd be curious to hear you speak how that has happened for you. For me personally, I think a lot of it is talking with other people. What is quote normal? What is okay? What is too much time with people? And then just knowing the core of how we're wired. Are we more introverted, that we need that alone time to recharge? Are we more extroverted, and knowing that balance? So finding that self-awareness, take, like you said, in corporate America, it was all about the other person, all about the other person, all about the other person. Flipping that switch on that page turn of you moving to Colorado, and now all of a sudden it became, what do I need? And where, and what, it's about me now. And not in a selfish or prideful way. It's literally just asking, like, what do I need as a human being right now in order to be the best version of myself? And for you today, that's a day of rest, and that's
Hmm.
wonderful. But someone in corporate America may think you're lazy or something like that because you're taking a day off. So what's that process for you of kind of undoing what you had learned through corporate America and Wall Street in New York City, and flipping that around to having that self awareness to know when to stop or to know what you need?
Sure. It's a tremendous amount of trial and error, and some days I get it right, some days I get it incredibly wrong. The My tagline on the podcast is, it's perfectly okay to not always be okay. And I kind of changed, I think, what we hear a lot in society, TikTok and Instagram, where everybody puts it's okay not to be okay, and I've always kind of responded to that and said, nah, not really. Like, I was not okay for a very long time, and that wasn't okay.
Mm.
It's one thing to not be okay, for a couple of days, or like you said, a week. Maybe you need to step away. You're feeling
Mm.
out of sorts. But if that lasts for a longer period of time, something needs to be addressed, something needs to change. And so I put the always in there in the tagline to kind of
Mm.
say it's okay to not always be okay, but more often than not, we want to be in a place where, like, we're above that line of just going through life. But yeah, it's been trial and error. I love you were talking about the introvert, and I've thought a lot about this introvert extrovert and how labels get thrown around as well. And for me, I think about it, it kind of morphs. There are environments where, like, I can be very extroverted when I'm on the snow, and when I'm with guests who I've been skiing with now for 10 years.
Mm.
The exchange that I have, and the conversations that I have, and the fun that I have, like, that's that to me is the ultimate in kind of being an extrovert for me. I can step into another environment. I'll give you an example. If we're going out to a dinner, and there are a bunch of people there, people that some who I know and some who I might not know, I am more than happy to kind of step into the room and be right behind my wife, and and let her be the one who
Mm.
is kind of meeting new people, and, like, slowly introducing me to them. And I in environments like that, I can find it to be a bit overwhelming, the newness of it all. And so for me, it's been a path of figuring out, like, what environments do I thrive in, and what
Mm.
environments do I not thrive in. And you talked about being vulnerable, and figuring out, okay, who can I be vulnerable with, and also the levels of vulnerability, like, how deep can I go with parts of my story with this person, or is this person who I spoke to a week ago, are they ready to even hear what's happening with me now? Are they in that place?
Mm.
Mhm.
The other thing too, we talked earlier, the word boundaries came up, and I had this really cool conversation with one of my guests on the chair yesterday, and you were sharing pieces of my story, and we were talking about her story as well. And the topic of boundaries came up, and I said, even when it comes to boundaries, I think the immediate thought around boundaries, people think about them as walls, and you're either on the inside of the wall or you're on the outside of the wall. And I
Mhm.
think of boundaries as more of a fence. It's kind of porous. And
Mm.
so sometimes you allow some things to flow through, and sometimes some things need to flow out the other side. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to completely block things out, or you have to completely shut people out of your life. And for
Right.
me, that's, yeah. Go ahead,
There's a
Mandy.
difference between a chain link fence and a brick wall.
I was
Exactly.
thinking of the exact same materials, Mandy, but nerd brain went to like a cell membrane. Let's go back to
Ah,
science class here, right?
and
Where
we're
it's
going
like
to go back to AP
Okay.
biology. Yep.
Yeah,
I was
right. Yeah.
never an AP biology,
It's a great
never a
class.
science person. I took
Yeah.
Earth and Space my senior year. But like you can
Okay, so you
see,
just went the cell route then, because that makes a lot of
That's
sense.
right. So are we
I'm
going to talk
sitting here,
fences, or are we going to talk
right,
mitochondria
right, yeah,
and cell
powerhouse of the
nucleus,
membranes?
cell.
And
right,
okay,
yeah. But there's also, I'm also thinking like an electric fence for a dog. You can't see it, but it's
Mm.
there.
yes,
An electric fence versus a chain link fence versus
yep,
a white picket fence versus a brick wall. That's
Mhm.
four very different
yep.
types of
And here,
boundaries.
living in Colorado, I'm sure you must have them in parts of, like, rural Pennsylvania, right, on farms, and you have those beautiful, like, wooden fences
Mhm.
that some
Hmm.
of them go on for hundreds and hundreds of yards, and there you see the horses or other animals, and they have all
Hmm.
this room to run around and play, and the fence is there, and yeah, they can kind of stick their head through it,
Hmm.
if they want, or you can back away, but it gives you a chance to kind of see a little bit what's on the other side of that
Mhm.
boundary,
Hmm.
and whether or not it's a boundary that you're kind of willing to cross.
Mm.
And in kind of the latest iteration of my own journey, just in the last year, what I started to really recognize is, who are those people in my chosen family, or my healing team,
Mm.
and who's in that circle, and then who's in this circle that I call kind of more the tangential people who I have these relationships with, and they might just be around, maybe it's around
Mm-hmm.
skiing, or maybe it's around mountain biking,
Mhm.
or maybe it's people I only see at a certain time of year, and that's perfectly okay. And we all need to have those relationships, but
Yeah.
I recognize those are not the people that I can really have those deep, vulnerable conversations with. And so, yeah,
Mm.
it's been just a lot of trial and error.
Mandy and
Yeah.
I talk a lot about relationships, different types of relationships. I'm going to be doing a series really soon on relationships,
Ooh.
like how to. Still, it's still in development, but
Yep.
that's an excellent. I think if I can, I might use your healing team analogy because I love that terminology. Of course, I will credit you with it. But you're right. It's your friends who you might go out to brunch with might not be on your healing team. The people you sit next to at work might be nice friends. They might be good people. They might be very close to you. They might not be on your healing team. And being able
Mm-hmm.
to draw that, again, that's a personal emotional boundary that you've been able to identify that you see and is very clear to you. And by making that boundary very clear to other people, saying, Mandy, I can trust you with my heart, then they know that you are safe with them and they are safe with you. That is a
Mm-hmm.
definite healing team relationship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love how you put that. You can absolutely use it all you want. We can even talk at another time off, about, how I created my own healing team and what that took.
Absolutely.
I
But
love that.
I'm going to direct this, because we were talking about men and women and the whole thing. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna put this in a way that the male audience can understand. So
Absolutely.
think of a healing team like, and again, I'm not a bro and I'm not into all these things, but I know that fantasy football has become like this huge thing. So think
I've
about,
played it before,
oh,
actually.
okay.
So
So
yeah,
there you go. So Mandy, you'll get this analogy.
sure.
It's thinking about your healing team is a lot like a fantasy football team, right?
Yeah.
The first time you put it together, right, you draft some players, maybe, Tom Brady's on there. My shout out to my New England roots. Um, and so you start to, but then you realize like, oh, this player, okay, they're not really okay. I need to exchange them for somebody else, and that's that kind of that healing team route and putting those boundaries in and
Sure.
recognizing like, okay, maybe the people who I first thought belonged in there, there's a couple who don't, and I need to, you know, I hate use the word exchange, but maybe I need to pick a couple of other people who are a little bit more open, or maybe who have, experienced something similar, and so that. When you get the healing team right, it's like having a really good, sports team, and you're the captain. And for people who have never been a captain of their own like athletic team or captain of the debate team, it's your one chance in life to actually be the captain of your own team, and you really
Sure.
drive it. And
Yeah.
you're the one who gets to raise your hand and say, this is what I need and when I need it, and reaching out to people. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's been, for me, that's probably been the most important part of my healing journey is putting together that healing team. And many of my friends and guests in the LGBTQ plus community, they call it their chosen family. It's
Mm.
often, when they come out or they transition, uh, their own families, there's typically some sort of a chasm that's created with one family member or others, and they find their chosen family, those people that they can surround themselves with, who are like them, who understand. And that's how, to me, healing team, chosen family kind of is in that same realm.
Mhm. It's a safety
And
measure for sure.
Yes.
yeah, I was going to say two things to that too. If we keep going on the fantasy football route, you also have to bench players,
I was
which
thinking.
I think is really interesting to bench them, because if you go to the same person constantly, you're going to wear them out and they will
Exactly.
just be tired. They'll shut down and then they're not helpful. So you need to give
Mm.
people a break. So having that variety, that I love the team analogy, because you have this variety. And I share that with people too. I have my friends that I go to for specific things. I've got friends that I've been friends with for my whole life, and I've got friends that I'm recent friends with that I can go to for different things. And it's just having that variety, having that that the pick and choose of who can handle what part of my heart and who can understand it and be there. I don't want to wear someone out all the time. And I have been in that position where somebody has worn me out too at some point in my life. And it's just tiring.
Yeah,
and
that's
so, and it's just like playing on a team. If you are constantly playing all the time and you're not benched or you're not benching someone as a coach, you're harming them. So kind of along the same lines of this boundary, the boundaries are there, like you said, about the animals, they're there for their protection, but they're there for our protection. If you have an animal that's going to hurt you, you need a fence between so that animal doesn't hurt you, but you also don't want to hurt that animal and like drive your car in the middle of a field or something and the animals there, like
yes,
there's, it's
yes,
like it's a mutual protection that you are giving to people. So the same thing with the benching players. Like your body needs a rest. For you today, your body needs a rest from snow. And that is
yes.
for your benefit and your protection, not for someone to say like, "Oh, you're not working today? It's Monday." Like it's like,
Yeah,
"No, this is what you
exactly,
need." So, and
exactly.
that's okay.
And I think the other thing that goes with that, you were talking about like, the benching of players, or is this like asking? And I think that's such a big piece of it is,
Mhm.
a- asking those people who are part of your team, like, are you in a place today where you're open to hearing, X, Y, and Z about what I'm going through? And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with, really good sports coaches understand, like, if they just left the players up to their own devices, those players are going to play the entire game each and every week, the entire season. Um, and sometimes you have to ask them, but ask them in an open-ended question kind of way, to get the real answer about, hey, I really think you need some rest. How is such and such feeling? And they'll say, yeah, I think I need to, I just need to sit on the bench this week. I need to recover. I'm tired,
Mhm.
or my body's just not feeling the way it should. And it's the same thing when it comes to mental health. It's saying, you know do I really need to keep pushing through, pushing through, pushing through? Maybe what I really need today is just a day where, I go to the hot springs, or I go get a massage, or I, sit by the fire with a really good book. And that's what my mental health needs, on that
Mhm.
particular day.
I think my mental
Right.
health needs all three of those things every single
Yeah.
day because those
Oh,
things are not readily available right around me. And that sounds wonderful.
Well, there are lots of
yeah.
flights from
It's
Philadelphia
true.
Yep,
to Denver, and then a quick drive into the mountains, where
for
we have all
sure.
of those things in
Sure.
excess.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of visiting Colorado a couple times in different seasons and it's very tempting. Very
It's on
tempting
my
just to
list of
uproot.
places to go. Yeah, I've never
Mhm,
been there before, but I want to. So,
mhm,
um, yeah, that's really cool. And I think, um, I think it's that self-awareness kind of circling back. We've got this whole like a little office term circling back, but
Ring
we have
fence?
this
Should we throw out all
this
the corporate?
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, we'll put a pin in this conversation. But
feel it.
if you have we're talking about vulnerability, we're talking a lot about self-awareness and boundaries. And I think a great thing with that too is to know that if I think people a lot of times take it really personally if you quote bench them, and it's not
Mm,
a and also vice versa. If all of a sudden someone stops coming to you for something, or they there can be other reasons, sure, but let's go with like the generic fantasy football, what we're talking about. If you feel like you are wearing someone out and you don't want to keep doing that, it's okay to be open with them and honest with them and tell them like, I don't want to wear you out. But I think what you're saying, which is really important, and again, as people of empaths and people that love to help people, to say, I am not in a place to give you advice or to
mm,
help support you or to encourage you today. Like my day, I'm encouraging myself, and that's all I can do today, really.
mm,
And that important open communication can really impact relationships. And again,
yeah.
going back to that, relationships crumble. We were just talking about this earlier. Relationships crumble with unmet expectations of someone, and putting them in a position where they cannot continue to meet the needs that they maybe once were, even a month ago, a week ago, 6 months ago, 5 years ago. Things change, and we need to have that self-awareness, to have the variety of people on our team. The role of a quarterback is very different than the role of a running back. That's very different than the kicker. They all have very different skill sets, and they are trained in different ways. And having that variety is what makes a successful fantasy football team.
And additionally,
Correct.
too, adding your medication and your therapy regime into that team is very important, because when the people around you are not able to support you, that is when you have professional support. And that is kind of I don't want to say like it's their job to be the quarterback when they need to be the pinch hitter or whatever. We're talking different sports now. Pinch hitter's baseball, isn't it?
Baseball is my favorite sport, so yes.
Yay!
Okay, there we go.
I'm
A bunch of
musician.
non-athletes talking about athletic analogies here, so
Although
this is great.
I'm very impressed with you today, Mandy, with you're holding this football analogy down.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, I'm like, volleyball, what? But being able to say, like, okay, psychiatrist, you're going to be my pinch hitter. Maybe we need to talk about a med adjustment. Maybe we need to address that this is what the last 6 months has been looking like, and it's feeling a little shaky. And just having, again, it's all about that awareness. Awareness has come up so many times today. And it's, I guess, why don't I ask you here, Erik, what is one thing? I know you're checking in with yourself every day, which is a huge way to increase your awareness. Do you have any other very specific kind of resource tips for anyone in our listener base who might be managing anxiety, might be managing OCD on a daily basis, for different ways to organically build awareness throughout their day to check in?
Sure. And I'm going to give you complete and total liberty to use this one as well. So yes, so it's what I have called my equilateral triangle of healing. So now we're going to go into geometry. We talked a little bit about biology earlier. So
wow, I am just being taken back to school today. That's all.
Right. So if you think about an equilateral triangle, right? All sides are equal. All angles are equal. They add up to 180, right? So what I deem to be my equilateral triangle of healing is, you have traditional Western medicines. So the things we think about, like talk therapy, for me, cognitive behavioral therapy. So retraining my brain, especially when it comes to OCD. Medication. So I also have a psychiatrist. So as you were saying, Kristen, this whole idea of, managing medications, and as my psychiatrist likes to say, it's the right medication and the right dosage at the right time. Sometimes that changes. So it doesn't just go on autopilot. So have to keep kind of checking in.
Yeah. The human body is alive and ever changing. So
exactly. Then there's another corner of the triangle, which is my Eastern medicine side. And so that incorporates mindfulness, meditation, Reiki, right? So all of those things that a lot of people, might not even be aware exists, right? So then the third corner of my triangle, and this is the one you guys will love, is sort of we'll call it the nature and the music therapy side of things, because for me, both of those are really important. Being in the outdoors, skiing and mountain biking, playing guitar, sometimes just listening to music, and I can't wait to drop my song at the end. And so for me, I look at it like a triangle. So I have these three different corners, and each and every day, I might need to lean on one of those corners a little bit more. But when I have it in balance, again, each of the sides are equal, so I can roll that triangle on any side and I have a super solid foundation. Because maybe today I need a little bit more of the mindfulness and a little bit less of, the skiing. Which is actually what's going on for me today. But maybe tomorrow I need a little bit more of the music, and maybe I go see my therapist and it's a little bit less when it comes to the mindfulness. But when it's all in alignment, I can roll that triangle on any side. I have a super solid foundation. If I neglect any one of those corners, the entire triangle crumbles.
Mhm.
And so that's why I've always looked at it as an equilateral, right? Because all the sides are as important as the other.
Yeah.
And if I neglect one, the whole thing, right, comes away. And so that's what I would say to your audience is, as you're kind of going through this journey, and it's a journey. It never ends. It's Lord of the Rings, except there's no ring. You never really find the ring. Um, it's this, always like saying, okay, what is it that I need today? Oh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
let me try this. Somebody was talking to me about, mindfulness. Let me see what that's all about. Oh, that's really cool. I'm going to incorporate that into my regime. Or,
Hmm.
when we talk about music, sometimes sometimes you just want to listen to, the same music and songs all the time. And then sometimes you realize, wait a second, I'm not really hearing the music because I know this
Mhm.
song so well. I'm just singing the words. Maybe I'm going to listen to a slightly different genre of music today, and that's going to help put me in a different mindset. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of
Hmm.
trying all these things and seeing how they fit into your toolbox, and
Hmm.
building your own triangle. Maybe it's an isosceles triangle. I don't know. Maybe it's a parallelogram. Um,
Sure.
but it's kind of figuring out how does this
Mhm.
all fit together for me.
Mhm.
I think you should name that left corner of your triangle the Rocky Road corner because it's music and nature, which is
There we
what
Yeah.
we
go.
do.
We
That's it.
we
Hiking,
can absolutely do that.
drinking.
So when
Yes.
you draw the diagram, just put the little Rocky Road in
Rocky
there. You can
Road.
put this. You can put the C with the circle of copy right
R
it or whatever.
squared. We'll
No,
just
I'm
do R
like,
squared.
all right,
There you
That's my
go.
R squared corner.
there you go.
Um,
Just kidding,
I
but
really appreciate your focus on the physical connection too, because so many, and my clients included, will say, and this is back before I went back to full time music therapy. I was working more on a forensic mental health setting, and they say, "Well, I'm taking my meds and I'm going to therapy. Why isn't it changing?" Okay, what are you doing? What are
Mm-hmm.
you
hmm
actively doing? You're checking boxes, but you have to be active in it. And your body, again, like I said, your body you're living and breathing and ever changing every moment of every day. Um,
hmm
so to be able to have that connection between your mental health and your physical health is something that just in general in the good US of A, we're not great at supporting. But like I said, little by little, we're going to start shattering those walls and encouraging people to be more holistic as well as, concentrating on what does work. And if that's medication, psychiatry, and skiing, great. If that's kickboxing, if that's meditation and a quiet walk outside, awesome. Whatever combination, it's not a prefix menu. You have this whole big giant diner menu with a million options to pick and choose what fills up that triangle each day.
Now
I
you're
love
making
that
me
visual.
hungry because I'm thinking about a Jersey diner menu and all 20 pages and all the amazing
yes,
photos. And
yeah,
yes, maybe I want
that is a
gravy.
benefit of the Northeast.
Maybe I want gravy fries today.
Oh.
There
Not
you go.
everyone's going to get that one. Yeah, and maybe today I'll have breakfast for dinner at the diner.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that
it's
happens too.
exactly what you said. It's what works on that particular day,
Mhm.
or in that moment of that day, and it could change like 5 hours later.
For
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, we again, as you had mentioned a couple minutes ago, we always ask our guests. Did I say that right? Guests for their song choice with the Rocky Road. So our playlist is very eclectic and very. Uh, there's a huge variety, and it's awesome. So we would love to hear what song you choose to add for your episode. And I feel like you've been dying to tell us what this is, and you're just gonna like totally throw us off course here. So if it has something to do with like School of Rock, since we've been going through this whole school day or something, that's great. But I'm just kidding. Just share with us what you have chosen.
Okay, so and when I share it, I'm looking forward to seeing your faces because
Jeez.
I'm really hoping this is like super eclectic and that I've taken a 180-degree turn in a
I have
place
no
that
idea
you
what to
have
expect.
not at all expected. All right, you ready?
Ready? We're ready.
Control by Janet Jackson.
That's amazing.
I did a modern dance routine to that in college. So that's what I'm thinking of right now.
So the reason I chose it this is especially for the first verse into the chorus. And so for your audience, I would say go back and listen to that song word for word.
Wow.
Because the story Janet really tells in that song is that's the first time that she broke out on her own with Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam. Again, dating myself.
No, you're not. We're music therapists. We're all good.
but but yeah, that song, and I really got into re-listening to Janet recently. My wife was always a big Janet and a big
Mhm.
Michael fan. She was a choreographer and dancer in high school and in college. And we saw a Janet Jackson special, and it was all about, her early life. And then when she finally like stood on her own 2 feet and said, okay, when I was 17, I did what people told me. Right. And I think back to my own life and how for so long I always did what other people told me, and I always did what I thought other people wanted me to do, and that was what was going to make me happy. But then I realized I could stand on my own 2 feet, and I could make those decisions, and I could do what was going to make me happy. And so when I finally took control of my own life, things really changed. And that
Mm.
was the moment. I'll bring it totally full circle when I went from survivor to thriver.
We really did go full circle because control was one of the very first things that you started to talk about. So, what a
Yeah.
beautiful bookend on either side.
Yeah.
I know that we're running not way over time, but it's too good of a conversation to stop. But I want I want our listeners to be able to find you. So you've mentioned your podcast, so we would love for you to share your Instagram, your full name, Erik Rosa, any way that they can get in contact with you and listen to everything else that you have out there in the world.
Absolutely. So the podcast name is From Survivor to Thriver. New episodes are released every Tuesday morning, and you can find us on all the major players wherever you listen to your podcasts. We have a really cool Facebook page called From Survivor to Thriver. It's a very interactive page. So in addition to putting up, the podcasts and things that we're doing around the show, we also put up really interesting posts around, what's happening in the world of mental health and the interaction of mental health and physical health. And we encourage people to come on to the page and contribute, send us messages. It's all about building community, one
Mm-hmm.
by one by one. And so that was really the meaning behind creating that page. You can find me again on Instagram if you're into seeing not only things about mental health, but cool photos of me, neck deep in powder, or mountain biking some beautiful trail here in the
Mm.
summertime. My handle is at Ski Sherpa, Skisherpa. Or you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's Erik, Erik, DeRosa, Darosa.
That's
Wonderful.
awesome.
We'll put everything in the show notes too. So if you are driving, please put the pen down and put both hands on the wheel. We can share it with you later. It's really
Isn't that like a Carrie Under, the beginning of a Carrie Underwood song?
Jesus, take the wheel. I got to write down Erik's stuff.
Yeah. But in this case, please put your hands on the wheel.
Yeah,
Please,
seriously.
grip. Safety first, kids. Safety first.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's been really wonderful to speak with you. I think that we have a couple of really cool connections. I think a lot of our priorities as far as what our missions are in our podcasts are very closely aligned. So it's really cool that we have similar missions and similar goals, and just, again, breaking stigmas of mental health. I know our tagline for our show is every time you tell your story, you heal a little more, which you basically said in different words in the very beginning, which is really cool. And I'm humbled to be speaking with you. It's just a really good conversation. I hope our listeners get in touch with you so that they can keep on supporting you as well. And we will talk to you all next time.